How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to Project Time Tech. Today we're going to cover using VMware to help out with some of these old resurrections of vintage computers. I have this Toshiba Libretto CT here that it's running Windows 95, and in fact it's running a Windows 95 clone of this 50 CT. See, I just imaged this drive and threw it on here because this one had a pretty botched install of Windows 98. And to do that, I use VMware to be able to make life easier and faster. And I thought it might be a cool video to take you guys along today and show you the steps I use and what I do in order to get some of this older hardware up and going using VMware. So let's get started. Now, in the case of this little Libretto, this is the drive that I had in it. It's just a 2.5-inch PATA drive. People often ask me why I use these as opposed to the, the CF to IDE adapters or whatever. Fact is, I've got a bunch of them laying around, and no point in wasting them, so I use them for projects just like this. They really make a huge difference versus the mechanical drives or the spinny drives that were in most of this vintage computer. Now, it's worth mentioning that you can use the floppy drive and load all this stuff in via floppy, but the fact of the matter is, in order to do that, you're either going to need a whole lot of floppies or you're going to need a bootable CD-ROM. And in this case, like this Libretto, for example, I have one floppy drive between the two of them, so it's not really conducive to do that. The plan is I'm going to take this drive that I already have sledded up to install in this Libretto. This thing is empty, it's formatted, it's an IBM TravelStar drive. I'm going to put this on my modern computer inside VMware. I'm going to attach it to VMware as a physical drive. We're going to make it bootable, and we're going to copy the Windows 98 installation files over, and we're going to put it back in this machine and boot from this drive and install Windows 98 2nd edition from this drive. Makes life much, much faster. So let's get you here to the PC and let me show you how I do that. Now, as far as what we're going to use to actually do the transfer, it's one of these little multi-function drive caddies. We have options for 5 1/4, 3.5, and SATA. And this thing just plugs into a USB plug on your workstation on your PC. In this particular case, we're going to take this IBM TravelStar drive here, and we're just going to caddy it up like that. I'll drop a link down in the description of this video where you can find the one that I've used. I've used this thing for quite a while, and it's really been good. I've had a couple of things that it just wouldn't do, but that was strange old stuff. But I've probably done 50 or 75 drives with this, and it's done very well. So anyway, let's get this thing plugged up to the PC. Now, I'm going to go ahead and use external power also, because this is a mechanical drive, and every little bit helps, right? So once we get this thing plugged up, I'm going to go ahead and switch it on. This thing has a power button or a power switch that you can turn it on with. Windows should come up and recognize it, and it did. And it's a blank 6-5G, so that's a 6.5 gig blank disk. I am going to go ahead and reformat it first, just because. We'll call it FAT32. We'll make it FAT32. We won't call it that. The volume label here, I'll just do CT70, I don't know, -98SE. How about that? And it's going to erase it all. All right, that format is complete. So now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and gather the tools that we're going to need in order to do this. So in my case, I have a NAS that I keep all kinds of this stuff in under the software directory, antique software, and utilities. So what I'm looking for now is going to be a blank diskette. And what I have is I have an image file here of a blank diskette. So since I'm going to be working mainly off my desktop, I'm just going to make a new folder right here, and we'll just call it CT70 since that's where we're going to be working. I'm just going to make a copy of that blank diskette right in here. There it is. So while I'm at it, I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to rename it 98 boot. because at the end of the day, we're going to clone a 98 boot disk on here. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to jump into VMware, but we're going to run VMware as an administrator, because later we're going to be attaching some physical hardware from the PC. And inside VMware, we're going to, I'm going to go ahead and launch a Windows 98 SE station that I already have. But before I do that, I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to jump into the floppy here, and I'm going to say use a floppy drive, and we'll browse out to our desktop, which is where we put this, and CT70 and 98 boot IMG. So at this point, we have a blank 98 boot disk, or we have a blank diskette image into the virtual floppy drive. So we'll say OK, and we'll go ahead and I'm going to actually, before I do that, let me make sure of one thing. Let's make sure that this floppy, okay, it's not connected at power on. That's important, because if we connect it at power on, it's just going to try to boot from this disk and error out. And I want to boot from my Windows 98 SE virtual. So that's good. Let's go ahead and boot this. We can go ahead and get a little bit bigger screen here while we're at it. All right. Gosh, that's loud. All right. Let's feed it the floppy disk. We'll just connect down here on our little floppy disk and connect. And at this point, I should have a valid A drive, and there's even some stuff on there. All right. So the way we want to do this is I'm going to go out into the control panel, and we're going to go into the Add Remove Programs dialog, and we're going to choose Startup Disk and Create Disk. Now it's going to want us to insert the Windows 98 SE CD-ROM, so let's make sure we go do that. So we'll right-click, we'll do Settings, and for the CD, we'll browse out. It doesn't seem to like UNC paths very well, so we'll choose Network. This is out on my NAS, under Software. Media Kits, I do believe, is the folder. And Microsoft Windows 98 and Windows 98 2nd Edition ISO. So this is the ISO that I'm going to use. And we'll click actually we'll do Connected, and we'll click OK. So it's telling us that this is on a network location. We already know that, but it's over a 10 gig connection, so I'm really not worried about latency. We'll hit OK. And I believe this is going to be, as opposed to D, this is going to be our E drive. And there it goes. So it's now telling us to insert a blank diskette into A, which we already have done earlier. It's going to erase that disk, and it's going to copy the Windows 98 boot files onto it. Okay, so that part is complete. At this point, let me go ahead and disconnect this floppy drive, and we'll disconnect this CD-ROM drive, and we can shut down our Windows 98 machine. We are finished here. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to create ourselves a brand new VM, and we're going to choose an old version of Workstation, like version 6 for example. We're going to install an operating system later. We're not worried about that. It's going to be Microsoft Windows. 3.1 is fine. It really doesn't make any difference. We can choose 3.1, 98, doesn't matter. This is not staying on this machine. And we'll just call it Test VM, because that's what we're going to be doing with it, is testing. Single processor. Now, since this is going to be Windows 98, 256 megabytes of RAM is fine. And we're not even worried about networking at all. And bus logic is going to work for us. It's going to be an IDE type drive. Now this is where it's going to get a little different here. Rather than creating a brand new virtual disk, we're going to actually tell it to use this physical disk drive that's on the workstation. So we click on Use Physical Disk, because, you know, we're advanced users and all. Next. Now it's going to ask us which drive we want to connect. We have 3 choices, and they're not really apparent which is which. It's probably going to be a physical drive 2, because 0 and 1 are I believe, the internal drives on the system. But here's how we check. We hit drive 2, and just for a second, we want to just use individual partitions. Now we're going to come back and change this in a second. So use individual partitions and next. And this basically just tells us a little more information. That's the only reason I came here. So it's 195 FAT32, and it's a 5.6 gigabyte drive. So obviously that is the correct disk. This is disk 2, or physical drive 2. So we're going to go backward, and we're going to choose the entire disk now that we're pretty sure that drive 2 is the correct one. So next, and it's going to ask for a temporary VMDK. That's fine. It's test VM. I'm good with that. And finished. All right. Now our test VM has a hard drive, the physical one. So let's edit the settings again, and we want to go ahead and connect that floppy disk that we made a few minutes ago. So we're going to do add, and we're going to do a floppy drive, and it's asking us which drive do you want to use, and we're going to use a floppy image file, and we'll browse out to I believe we put this on our desktop, and we put it under the CT70 folder, and there's our 98 boot diskette that we made a few minutes ago. Now while we're in here, we need to get a source for the Windows 98 installation files, and that's going to be via a CD. In this case, it's a virtual CD, an ISO file, which is also out on my NAS. The object of the game here is to be able to get all of those installation files and copy them onto this disk and make this disk bootable at the same time. So we're going to click on CD DVD drive, and we're going to use an ISO image, and we're going to browse out to that ISO image, which is also going to be out on our network, which is my home NAS software directory, and I have a media kits directory out here. And this is basically where I keep installation medium for all kinds of different things, including Windows 98. And here's my Windows 98 2nd edition ISO. And with that in there, well, before we do OK, we're going to make sure we have our hard disk, which is the physical drive here. We have our floppy disk that we're going to boot from, which is our boot image that we made earlier. And we have our CD drive, which is pointing out to an ISO file located across my my network on a NAS, which is up in the house. I believe we're good. Let's do OK, and let's power this thing on. We should boot from the floppy disk. We did. It's going to ask us to start the machine with or without CD-ROM support. Since we're going to be copying files from the virtual CD drive onto this, we're going to need to start it with CD-ROM support. And we'll just wait longer. All right, so now we're at the A drive. At this point, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to reformat the C drive, but I'm going to format the C drive with this diskette. All right, this is not necessarily necessary, but I've had some weird anomalies in the past when I format an old disk image on a newer machine and then try to install something else over it. So before we do that, let's also take note of right here. This is drive E. This drive E is going to be our CD drive. So if you look out here, E, that is our drive. Now before we do anything, let's run fdisk and let's make sure that we see our C partition. And we're going to enable large disk support because it's technically a very large disk. Not really. Let's look at our partition information. Partition 1. Status is active for booting. It's a primary DOS, CT7098SE, usage 100%. So I see it. I'm going to go ahead and format it. And I'm going to use the /S switch, which will transfer the system ms.sys, io.sys, command com over onto it and make it technically bootable. Now, it won't have any utilities on it, but it would actually, at that point, boot to that disk or to that drive if I rebooted to it. And I believe we call this CT70-98SE. And there's that. Now, looking out here at C, I've got command com, and I've also got iosys and ms.sys as well. So this drive is technically bootable now. But if you look out here on our A drive, there's a bunch of other stuff out here that are utilities and things like the autoexec.bat file, fdisk command, all this stuff. So let's copy everything there onto this disk, onto this C drive. Ooh, that's a comma. Star.star to C:\\. And we're not going to overwrite command com because, well, we just put it there. Okay. At this point, our C drive is a pretty close representation of our A drive. But let's jump out here for one more thing. Since the A drive was the bootable drive, we need to go in and make sure that autoexec and config sys don't inadvertently point to A, because we're going to be booting up on the Libretto without an A. So config.sys, and basically what I'm looking for is anything in this document that points to the A drive. So we don't want it to say, hey, try to load a:\_hymem.sys if we don't have an A drive, because that's just going to be an error. Going through here, and there is nothing. So we'll close that and let's look at autoexec.bat. Okay, here's something right here. In the path, see, our path is a:\\, but we're not going to have an a:\/ when we boot up on the Libretto. We're just going to have a c:\\. So that's one thing. Let's see if there's anything else here that matters. Nope. Okay. Alt FX, Y to save. There's another batch file here. Directory star.bat. The setram. setramd.exe. Let's edit this because, well, I don't know how to type. Set. It's not an exe file, is it? Edit setramd.bat. All right, so in here, okay, here we go. Here's a prime example of it. In this batch file here that gets called, it's actually calling something a:\find ramd. And we're not going to have an A drive. We want that to be C. I believe that's the only thing left here that we have to do. Yeah, Alt FX, yes. All right, so at this point, we're basically done with the floppy disk. Now let's turn our attention to the CD-ROM drive. Now, that's, I believe they said that was E, I believe, yeah. Everything that we're going to need is going to live in this Win98 directory. And there are tons of cabinet files here that need to be copied over onto this disk. To do this, I'm going to make a directory in here called Windows, and then another one inside that called Options, and another one inside that called Cabs. And we'll copy everything into that. So, we're going to make a directory called c:\Windows. Whoops. Let's try this again. Make directory c:\Windows. Windows Options. Can you tell them in Linux a lot? I keep wanting to use /. So I have to physically tell myself not to do that. Windows Options Cabs. All right. At this point, we're just going to copy star.star to c:\Windows Options Cabs. Now, basically what this is going to do is going to copy everything that's in the directory that I'm sitting in, i.e. the CD-ROM drive, Windows 98, going to copy all that stuff to C Windows Options Cabs. All right, so that's it. We're finished. We're finished with VMware completely for now. So let's go ahead and let's power off the VM. But before we do this, before we uncaddy this and get rid of it, let's go ahead and let's jump back into settings. And let's take our floppy disk and let's unconnect it. And let's take our DVD drive and let's unconnect it. And that's going to leave us with only this drive on the system. We'll hit OK. Yes, I know. And let's start it up. Now it should boot right from this C drive. And we're just going to start it without CD-ROM support for now because, well, we've unplugged it. There we go. We have a C drive. And we have our Windows directory and our options and cabs directory of Windows. There's all of our cabinet files. Now what we can do is CD to Windows, and we can type setup right here. Hit enter. And it's basically doing a disk scan. It's probably going to find something wrong here because I've messed around with it some. Yeah, so let's fix it. And exit. And here we go into the Windows 98 setup. Now, I'm not going to install Windows 98 on the bench like this. I'd rather get it in my actual workstation. So for now, we're just going to exit setup because we know two things. We know that it'll boot from this, and we know that we can start a Windows installation from this, which is really all we need. And that took about 15 minutes there. So let's power this thing down. And we can turn off our drive caddy once all the activity is done. There we go. Now on our little CT70 Libretto here, it's going to be just as simple, hopefully, as inserting the drive in it. Make sure we're fully seated. We'll plug in some power. And let's power it up and let's see what happens. And we're going to start this without CD-ROM support because, well, we don't have a CD-ROM drive on the thing. All right, so here we are at a C drive. Hopefully that comes through the camera okay because it's pretty doggone dark. Anyway, CD to Windows, option, oops, back to my, here I come in Linux world with forward slashes again. Windows options cabs, and we'll just type setup. And let's hit enter. Now it's going to check the disk again, which I'm completely okay with that. Now obviously once we're done here, we'll have to come back and we'll have to install all the drivers and things because this thing has some pretty specific hardware. So we'll have to take care of all that, but that's really no big deal. That's just part of an installation. So we'll come back when this is done and we're to the point of installing Windows. Well, that took pretty much forever. I don't know why it was so slow this particular time, but anyway, we should be able to continue and we should be able to run through the entire installation process. I'll zoom you guys in here, get you sort of straightened up, and I'll just kind of time lapse this as we go. Now, it's important also, since setup already sees a C:\Windows directory, it doesn't want me to install in that. It thinks there's already something there. We know that there's not. We're going to choose other directory, and we're going to go ahead and tell it to install in C:\Windows anyway, even though there's already one there. And it says yes. Oh my gosh, holy crap. Do you know what you're doing? Yes, I know exactly what I'm doing. Okay, well, we are finally booted up and we're through the installation process. Now, I'm not sure what drivers Windows was actually able to pick up and which drivers it wasn't able to pick up. I typically use these compact flash PCMCIA adapters for most all of my old computers, but we need to make sure that we have PCMCIA support, because this is how I'm going to get everything onto the machine going forward. And I also have this Cisco AeroNet 350 wireless LAN card, because you know, you definitely want your Windows 98 machine to be on the network, right? Because how are you going to get hacked without getting, you know, and on the network first? Anyway, I have one of these that I'm going to try to just drop in here, and we're going to see if it reads it or not. I don't know if it will. So it found PCMCIA card services, but something tells me that it's not going to be the correct PCMCIA card services. Unknown device. Hopefully that's going to be a disk drive. Let's close this. Now let's see. Let's turn this air conditioner off for a second so you guys can hear me without such background noise. And we'll just install the basic one now. It actually seems to have picked it up. Look at that. Libretto drivers. What do you know? Now let's see what we have for display right off, because 256 colors. Can I do? Yes, I can actually do true color. So I don't think I'm going to fool with trying to put anything else on this. You know, any better drivers. It shows it as a Chips and Tech display driver. So, and that's what we have. So that's really good. So Windows 98 has a lot of stuff for it anyway. My sound works. My PCMCIA card services work. I actually see my IR back here. So that's there. Wow. Okay. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and try to get this Cisco AeroNet display driver, or Cisco AeroNet wireless driver working. Let's I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop this one. And we have a little thing back there to be able to pull it out with. Thing is, I don't remember which one of these has what I need on it, so let me go figure that out. I now have it sorted out. This is the one that contains the drivers for the Cisco AeroNet 350. I mean, at the end of the day, I still have all this stuff out on the NAS. It's just that I knew I had it somewhere. Hopefully we can just install this, and then that'll be that. Cisco ACU. I see the card flashing, so that looks okay. Well, it says I'm associated now that I've got all that set up. Let's do a quick WinIP CFG and let's see what we get. We'll choose the AeroNet. Yeah, I've pulled an IP address off of my network. Good. Now, I want to show you something neat since we're online and we have access to the internet and everything. There is a service called ProtoWeb, and basically what that is it's a proxy server that that you can run through and access just thousands of retro websites, things that have been restored, basically. They're including downloads. And the way we do this is, for example, Internet Explorer. We'll right-click, we'll go down to Properties, and we're going to go to Connections, and LAN Settings, and we're going to use a proxy server. And that proxy server is going to be wayback.protoweb, protoweb.org. And that's going to be on port 7851. It's going to be the same for FTP also. Okay. Now that that's done, we should be able to fire this thing up. And look, I'm loading Microsoft.com/IE. How cool is that? Let's go somewhere interesting like MSN. just as fast as we remember it too. There we go. Now this is current information. This is current MSN, but it's formatted for this browser to be able to handle. I think that's pretty interesting. So anyway, you can take some time and go out there and have a look. There's an entire web ring of different sites out there that have been restored, and there's a ton of them. It makes these retro machines just that much more fun. So go check it out, protoweb.org, if you are into this kind of stuff. I have no affiliation with them, but I find it very cool. Well, that's got our little libretto pretty well into shape. There's a bunch more stuff I want to add to it. I've already installed Microsoft Plus 98, but I'll put Office and PC Anywhere. Actually, I've already put PC Anywhere on there, but I'll put a few other things on there, you know, as time goes on, just to make it a proper cool little machine. If you're not familiar with my channel already, I'm in the process of doing a collection of tiny PCs from each generation of Windows, starting from like DOS days and trying to collect whichever vintage PC would be relevant for the time period all the way up through Windows 11. And, you know, I've got a pretty good collection started here. I've got, you know, a compact Contura Aero at Windows NT 3.1. I've got a Toshiba Libretto 50 CT at Windows 95. I've got a Sony Vaio handheld here at Windows Vista. And then there's this one at Windows 98. I'm not sure I'm going to call this my entry for Windows 98 because it's a native Windows 95 machine, and I want to have some purity in my collection there. So I'll try my best to find a Windows 98 box to do this with. But during the course of doing this, you know, you find a lot of tips and tricks and ways of doing things. And I've been collecting vintage laptops and workstations for a long time. And like I said, you just find little tips and tricks. And VMware was a pretty powerful tool to be able to leverage to, you know, expedite some of this and make life a little bit easier when you're doing this. So I figured I might share it with you guys. I hope you did get something out of it. I hope it was helpful. Hope it was entertaining. If you guys have any suggestions for future videos, I appreciate it if you drop it down there in the comments. I'd love to entertain it. So until next time, guys, thanks for watching.